actor, singer, performer, Bing Crosby was the definitive all-round entertainer.
He represents wholesomeness, something that's reassuring. Even from his early days on screen, he seemed to be already an elder statesman.
And get in line. Off on the road to Morocco. Hang on till the end.
His singing style ushered in a whole new era of styles which we now call crooners.
The dance of the seven veils. We tell you more.
He went from being a radio star to TV to film, a man who adapted to whatever the world was throwing at him at the time.
One of the best-selling recording artists of the 20th century, Bing was loved and admired across the globe.
People just thought Bing was the epitome of the decent American guy who'd made it big on the screen.
Bing Crosby was born Harry Lillis Crosby Jr. in Tacoma, Washington in 1903. 3 years later, his family would move to Spokane, Washington, where young Harry would spend his formative years.
Bing was one of a large family, 7 children. His parents were strivers, not exactly working class, but not exactly middle class either. They were, on the whole, an ordinary, a very ordinary American Catholic family.
When he was about 6, he was reading The Funnies in the Spokesman newspaper. And there was a feature in it called the Bingville Bugle, which was a kind of parody of Hillbilly Newsletter. And he was laughing his pants off. He was about 6. And a neighbor, he sort of saw him laughing, and he just called him Bingo from Bingville. And for some reason or other, the name just stuck, and they dropped the O, and he became Bing.
In 1917, Bing Crosby saw Al Jolson perform live, an event that would have a lifelong effect on the young Bing. After playing drums and singing in local high school bands, 1925 saw Bing form a vocal duo with friend Al Winkler.
Bing knew Al Winkler from school, and Bing was singing with a group of local school kids, just performing at school dances and that kind of thing. And that's when he sort of joined up with Al Winkler again, and they formed a vocal duo.
Now, it so happened that Al's sister was a famous singer, and she introduced him to Paul Whiteman, America's most celebrated band leader at the time. Very, very famous, very, very powerful. Everybody loved his work. He thought they might make a sort of nice addition to the band.
Happy feet, I've got those happy feet.
Whiteman hired Crosby for $150 a week, and with the addition of further members, the group was named the Rhythm Boys.
It's remarkable when we think about it today. From this small town, he goes into the Rhythm Boys, and it had Jimmy and Tommy Dorsey, Hoagie Carmichael, and Bing Crosby in it. You just can't imagine that happening today.
They were rubbing shoulders with, you know, the jazz greats, the swing jazz greats at the time. As it went on, Bing's voice and his easy style just sort of rose above the other two.
The wellspring, of course, of Bing Crosby is the voice. It does come down to this extraordinary kind of whiskey-deep cello voice that he has, you know, this lovely baritone that he must have had from a very early age.
Crosby became the star of the Rhythm Boys and had his own #1 hit with the Whiteman Orchestra in 1928 with a jazz-inspired cover of Old Man River.
Old Man River, that old man river, he don't say nothing, but he must know something, 'cause he just keeps rolling. He keeps rolling along.
In 1930, Crosby married his first wife, Dixie Lee. The couple would have 4 children. Although Crosby was quickly becoming a success, his personal troubles threatened to derail his career.
At that time, he drank a lot and was very much a boyo, misbehaved in many ways, and was a bit of a tearaway, and it was a little bit difficult to discipline him.
The crunch came when Bing was involved in a drunk driving accident and ended up in jail. This was a time when Paul Whiteman was actually making a film called The King of Jazz, and Bing was supposed to be in it. And what they had to do, he had to get him out of jail, and he came to the studios in handcuffs each day.
He misbehaved thoroughly throughout the film, apparently, and in fact his part was cut out entirely. But when people saw the film and knew that Bing Crosby had been in it, it had to be reinstated. So Bing was reinstated in the part, despite his misbehavior, and it became a big success.
After appearing in the film The King of Jazz, Bing left the Rhythm Boys to pursue a solo career, and in 1931, he had his first solo success with the #1 hit, Out of Nowhere.
You came to me from out of nowhere.
He signed with Brunswick and made his first proper single, which was Out of Nowhere. Very aptly named because it was a huge hit, and it was as if he'd just sort of been born into the public consciousness.
Out of Nowhere was his first #1 hit. It was kind of an unusually structured song. Went on to become very popular in later years as well. Django Reinhardt later did a version of it.
Crosby's interest in music recording methods led him to develop a new style of singing. First showcased in Out of Nowhere, this style would come to be known as crooning.
Bing was always interested in the way that he sounded. And in fact, in the course of Out of Nowhere, he'd got a special microphone, or the microphones were very close to him, and they were sort of state of the art. And it was in the third chorus, actually, that he introduced, for the first time, a more intimate sound.
You came to me from out of nowhere.
Normally, the singers up until that point had been sort of rather declamatory because, of course, the microphones and the electronic equipment wasn't quite up to standard. So they would sort of, even some of them would use megaphones. But it was the first time anybody had heard somebody almost breathing a lyric.
If you're using a microphone, you don't have to belt it out to the cheap seats in the back. You can really use a much more intimate, conversational style. You've got the microphone up close. So using the microphones in this way really invented a whole new style of singing. They call it crooning. He didn't like that term, but it's really apt.
By that time, he was beginning to become the personality, the Bing everybody knew and loved. And there was no doubt about it that Hollywood took note of him.
As the 1930s unfolded, Bing's popularity grew, and he had his first starring role in The Big Broadcast. After appearing in a few Mack Sennett shorts, Crosby signed with Paramount Pictures.
Now, folks, we will regale you with a slight song.
One of Bing's first on-screen successes came with the starring role in 1940's The Road to Singapore, in which he appeared opposite his great friend, Bob Hope.
Do you remember Yuba, who played on the tuba and made the rumba such a popular beat? The old peanut vendor was a solid sender, not to mention Piccolo Pete.
He was easy with movies. He was as easy with movies as he was with a microphone. Having gotten himself into the swing of movies, he teamed up with Bob Hope, who had already had some huge successes with comedy films. And they started making a series of films called The Road to.
Sunbeams try new dance steps, songbirds sound their A's.
The road movies were incredibly successful. The Road to Singapore was the first one. He and Bob Hope absolutely worked together so easily and so fluently.
Hey, look. We could have thought of another way to get us here.
Here we go again, Junior. We're off on the road to Morocco. This taxi is tough on the spine. Beats the bus, huh, Junior? Beats me. Where we're going, why we're going, how...
After the success of Road to Singapore and then Road to Zanzibar, a further sequel, Road to Morocco, was released in 1942. This series would run to 9 films in all.
These were an enormous success. It's very difficult to understand just how big these films were at the time, because now they look a bit sort of eggy, actually. They haven't stood the test of time quite as well as, say, the Carry On films. But I think the reason behind their enormous success was that both stars, who were enormous stars in their own right, traded off each other. They basically played themselves.
Hey, what's a driving doing in the middle of the desert?
I'm no quiz kid. Come on, let's eat.
Well, I'll force something.
Hey, toss us a couple of mugs of Java.
We got our own sugar. 2 tall double-dip hamburgers.
Not too well done, please.
And a couple of mile-high beers.
Hey, it's moving. We gotta grab it. Hey, come back.
Wait a minute.
Hey! Hey!
If you watch them again, they're not particularly deep, they're not particularly well developed, but they thrive on the chemistry between the two guys, and certainly the two guys and the girl, where Bob Hope would bring a kind of buffoonish, easy, fast-talking quality to it, and Crosby would be the voice in a way. He would be the more laid-back, slightly more together, not necessarily the straight man. I think that kind of defines it as too much a comedy double act, and I think there's a bit more to it than that. But he was kind of certainly the kind of the guy the girl was going to get.
For any villains we may meet, we haven't any fear.
Audiences ate these up. They loved them. They were funny, they were adventurous, family-friendly entertainment. They worked so well together as a pair, and with Dorothy Lamour. They had a lot going for them.
Just found a hole in my shoe, and my stocking shows through. Ho, hum. Ho, ho, hum.
He was making records, of course, all this time, and their records were selling and selling and selling.
They were becoming huge celebrities, and they were cultivating this idea of brands. You know, I think this is one of the first times, certainly in Crosby's case, where, you know, who Bing was a brand, and it was a brand across records and films and a public life, and it made him millions and was selling millions of records. You know, what he was selling was Bingness. You were giving Bingness to the world.
Bing Crosby had become one of America's most popular performers, and after the outbreak of World War II, he traveled to entertain the troops.
The stardom was kind of very well managed, I think, certainly by him. As the career grew and the more the films started to come, he kind of cultivated the idea of the Bing Crosby persona and what it represented outside of making the films and making the records. So he very publicly visited the troops during the war. He became a kind of emblem of America in a way, of what they were fighting for, because he represented a kind of fireside goodness, you know, the kind of Spokane boy, and something that embodied all they were kind of doing, a kind of moral upstandingness.
It turned out that in a poll, he came top of the people who felt that they'd provided most of the war effort, above President Roosevelt, above Eisenhower, and above Bob Hope, his great friend and golfing buddy. So he'd clearly done his bit.
Crosby's work entertaining the troops also led to a discovery that would change the way music and vocals would be recorded.
In the process of being in the war and being in the European theatre at the time, at least if it wasn't him, then one of his sort of gang, as it were, discovered in Germany recording equipment that was infinitely superior to anything they had in America, and basically sort of just nicked it and brought it back to the States, along with a sort of case full of tapes. This was to prove really, really important in the development of recording.
In 1942, Crosby starred in Holiday Inn opposite Fred Astaire.
Here she comes down the street.
My, oh my, ain't she sweet?
Why, here comes my hot toddy.
Over my dead body.
The film features the song which would then become his biggest hit, White Christmas.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know, where the treetops glisten and children listen to hear sleigh bells in the snow.
White Christmas, great Irving Berlin song. It was an enormous hit. I mean, unbelievable hit. Up until Elton John's new version of Candle in the Wind, it was the biggest selling single of all time, ever in the history of recorded music.
May your days be merry and bright.
As much as kind of the recordings were getting sophisticated, I think the films weren't, and he was maintaining the kind of Bing quality, and If you watch Holiday Inn, again, it's kind of a bit of a kind of wishy-washy romantic tale in which he and Fred Astaire kind of lose the girl and get the girl and chase the girl, and neither of them were particularly sort of virile, you know, romantic leading men, so it was hard to buy into it. But you get Bing singing, and the whole world stops as he sings White Christmas.
May your days be merry and bright.
And even now, it sends a shiver down your spine when you hear it, as silly as the film is.
But this was the time when people really, during the war, they really wanted something that was comforting and that gave them the old values of family life and the rest of it. And a nice film with nice stars and good songs was exactly what they wanted. So you can't really blame the films. When I see them now, I have a laugh. But at the same time, when it gets to White Christmas and the snow falling outside, this obvious set is really rather wonderful still.
White Christmas was now the song that was synonymous with Crosby. We are told that he really can't stand it, and I don't blame him, frankly, because, of course, it became the thing that everybody wanted to hear.
After the success of Holiday Inn, Bing sought out more challenging dramatic roles.
Good morning. Excuse me, but could you tell me where I'd find St. Dominic's Church?
Eh?
I'm looking for St. Dominic's Church.
In 1944, he starred as a Catholic priest in Going My Way.
What's your name?
Father O'Malley. Charles Francis Patrick O'Malley. What's yours?
In film terms, I think the defining persona is Going My Way, which he would win an Oscar for, in which famously he plays a priest who comes to a small town, and through his sheer, the sheer magnetism of his Bingness, he would, transform the citizens and make them happier.
You got chord number 1, chord number 2, chord number 3. Put those 3 chords together and we can sing a song. Now, I'll hold up the fingers and those will be your signals. Watch the signals now. Make out on the catcher. I'm giving you the signals. 1, 2, 3. Ready? Here's your note.
My silent night.
He appeared as a Catholic priest, but a rather unorthodox one with a baseball cap and wearing the clothes of his poverty-stricken parishioners. Incredibly popular because he had this wonderful relaxed style which showed that the church was something that was able to be absolutely normal to their parishioners, not to appear to be ridiculously ennobled by the priesthood. There he was in his baseball cap, helping the problems of the poor. The Americans just loved it.
He was initially reluctant to take on the role of Father O'Malley because he was a Catholic himself. He was a little bit nervous about playing a priest, but thank goodness he did. It was a career-making performance.
What about your mother?
Well, I don't remember much about her. She died when I was quite young.
Going My Way was nominated for 10 Oscars and walked away with 7, including a Best Actor award for Crosby.
You know, tooraloo-raloo.
It's a rather schmaltzy film in hindsight, but it's certainly the kind of film the Academy used to love, that kind of what they thought was kind of life-enhancing. Its message was, upstanding and heartfelt.
That's an Irish lullaby.
I think the reason he got it was probably sentimental reasons, and also the fact that he showed he had acting chops. I mean, there's no question about it, he acted the part, but I think it was probably an antidote. It was a corrective to, the bad periods that people have been through, and they wanted a little bit of hope and sunshine. And that film provided it, and he provided it, because whatever else happened, Bing was not a villain.
Well, children, you're going to see a lot of me in the future. I'm going to be around here a great deal. You're going to hear the shortest speech ever heard. This is a holiday. Everybody take the day off.
Bing reprised his role as Father Chuck O'Malley in the 1945 sequel, The Bells of St. Mary's, this time starring with Ingrid Bergman.
Do you realize what you've done? These children are liable to get into mischief, and the responsibility is yours.
Well, it seemed like a good idea.
Did he deserve to be nominated for the second film in which he played the same character? Probably not, but I mean, it was no chance he was going to get it. He's one of only a handful of actors who've ever been nominated for the same role in two different films anyway.
Both of those films, actually, in some Catholic countries, they were banned because it was thought to be not correct that a Catholic priest should wear a baseball cap. But he got an Oscar for one, was nominated in the other, and that was an extraordinary success for him after the road movies, which were pure comedies.
Do you remember this? Song and Dance Man.
Song and Dance Man, that's right.
In 1946, the musical Blue Skies saw the pairing of Crosby and Fred Astaire once again.
Can you play it?
Sure.
Play it.
All right, go ahead.
In us you see a couple of song and dance men. I'm the song, I'm the dance.
He made a film called Blue Skies. It was a sort of classic musical story with a sort of love triangle in the middle of it. And the guy he wanted was Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire had more or less stopped. He was 47 and he'd more or less stopped making films. But he got, and there was another guy cast, I think his name was Paul Draper. Bing Crosby, and this is the extent of his power and his sort of ambition, basically got Draper sacked and got Astaire in.
I came to serenade a very pretty maid. I sang her to sleep with a sleep in the deep.
That always makes them collapse.
Astaire said it was going to be his last film as a dancer. It nearly was. He did make one much later, but it was his sort of swan song in terms of that particular period. And they worked incredibly well together.
Crosby showed a lifelong interest in the recording process and actively funded research into continuing technological advancements.
People don't actually realize about Bing that he was a very shrewd operator, no question about that. He knew all the best people and he wanted them to work for him.
Quite apart from being a great singer and an entertainer, he was an extraordinary entrepreneur, and he had an extraordinary sense of what was the next big thing. And recording and the quality of recording was a lifelong obsession with him.
The voice precedes everything in a way, and he was incredibly forward-looking. And in terms of the technology and certainly recording, you know, this is a guy who's ended up selling like 500 million records.
I feel so welcome each
But he was very fastidious almost about how you maintain this and how he could further, you know, and he looked very much into and developed himself and put money into recording studios. He set up the Crosby Foundation. He researched about how this great baritone voice could be laid down onto tracks.
He invested in the first reel-to-reel recording, and he had with him people who really wanted to advance radio and television.
Crosby pushed to begin pre-recording his radio shows, a development which did not impress his radio broadcaster, CBS.
The radio station, CBS, he was working for, did not like the idea of recorded work because they didn't think that the quality of recorded songs or material was anything like as good as it was in the live broadcast. That was true up to a certain extent until Bing came along with this new equipment that had been sort of hijacked from Germany. He wanted to develop recordings because it would free him, as well as all artists, up from actually having to be in one place at one time and then have to sort of do it again.
It's joked that he wanted to pre-tape radio or TV recordings so that he could go out and play more golf. He was a very avid golfer, a very good golfer. Maybe that was the reason he started, but it was really quality for the audience. You could edit out the dead bits, you could make a better program, and you know, he was one of the pioneers of this.
I mean, you could record the thing, you could edit it, you could lay all kinds of stuff over it, and then we would freely disseminate it. And principally, it meant that he could send it out across the 3 time zones.
There was no question to change the music industry utterly. So, in many ways, Bing was not just the wonderful old Bing, but somebody much shrewder than that, a very good businessman who knew exactly how to bring radio up to date and recording up to date, and he insisted upon it.
In 1954, he starred in White Christmas, a loose remake of his 1942 film Holiday Inn. The title song was re-released with continuing success. Later the same year, Bing Crosby starred opposite Grace Kelly in The Country Girl.
What'd you have to make that crack about responsibility for?
Why didn't you tell me about that audition this morning, Frank?
Because I wasn't sure whether I could make it or not. I must have walked up and down 47th Street a dozen times before I could make myself go through
Why
it.
didn't you tell him?
The film where he does kind of suggest there was more to Bing than Bing was The Country Girl, with his first film with Grace Kelly, which is it has a kind of a Star is Born quality to it, in which he is kind of the washed-up singer, he is the washed-up star, and has to play someone who isn't necessarily as genial as he had played before.
The most serious part he ever did probably was The Country Girl, where he played a washed-up singer and behaved in the way that he probably had behaved earlier in his career. And it was he got an Oscar nomination. He didn't win the Oscar, but it was a remarkable turnout for him to actually play what he actually might have become.
He played basically an alcoholic actor out on his luck, who is redeemed by the love of a good woman in spite of his own self-destructive tendencies.
You catching cold?
That's all I need.
You're probably smoking too much. Try and go to sleep, Frank.
I want to see the review in the morning paper first.
You can see it at breakfast. You need sleep.
Can't sleep until I know what they thought of me. Time do they deliver the morning paper around here anyhow? In the afternoon?
It's quite a tough film. I mean, it's got sort of streaks of sentimentality in it and actually stands up quite well. But one can't help feeling that he is certainly tapping into something of his earlier days.
Critics really responded to him taking on this darker material. It's a tougher guy than we've seen Bing Crosby play before, and he pulled it off well. He got an Oscar nomination for it.
All you have to do is get some sleep.
But the understudy, he's going to want to get in here.
I just listened to him read, Frank. He's no good. You'll have to play the matinee.
Oh, no, Bernie. Just don't stick your neck out.
Listen, Frank, I'm in no mood to cut my throat in public. The understudy stinks, and you're the only thing I've got around.
It's not just the matinee, Bernie. I've been thinking, you got to replace me.
When you took this job, I promised you no pity. And no pity it's going to be.
I don't expect any. I'm only warning you, get rid of me. Let me go back to New York.
He's interesting in it, actually. It's probably his most, interesting performance. And certainly a sense of, because I think he made it at the time when the fame and the career had reached its zenith and was just starting to tail off. So he might have been staring into his own kind of life a little bit.
Even when I was the biggest, I was afraid. I've always been afraid.
Although Bing was now the most popular performer in America, his personal life did not always reflect the jovial and friendly character he portrayed on screen.
The story goes that what you saw on screen wasn't necessarily what he was like. He was very demanding. He was a perfectionist. He was kind of relatively difficult to work with, I think. And there are dark stories of his relationships with his children, that he was a distant, uncommunicative father, and there are even stories of violence.
His own marriage broke up rather sadly because his wife became an alcoholic. Whether she became an alcoholic because of his coldness towards her, people said that he was a very different man from the Bing we all knew and loved. One of his sons said that they took a long journey to the studio, and on the journey, just with his son, he didn't speak to him at all. It was over 100 miles in the car, didn't speak to him at all. As soon as they reached the studio, he became the Bing everybody loved.
So there's this kind of idea of which is, again, is not uncommon in superstars, and certainly in stars who have maintained a very genial personality, that there might be more, that he was sort of someone who's hard as nails, kind of underneath that, maintaining it. I think the kids came out and said, we wish he was like, the characters he played, because he wasn't. The audiences got someone we didn't.
Suntan, wind-blown, honeymooners at last alone.
In 1956, Crosby starred with Grace Kelly, Frank Sinatra, and Louis Armstrong in High Society.
Oh, how lucky we are.
Probably High Society is one of the most sophisticated musicals there is going. It is a wonderful film, based on the Philadelphia story. Proper script, really interesting characters. It does exactly what it says on the package. It's about sort of conflicts between people in high society. And the music is just sensational. Just the vision and the sound of seeing True Love being sung by Bing Crosby and Grace Kelly, it sort of just stops your heart.
But to give to you and to give to me love forever true.
It also has one of my favorite songs of any musical, which is often called What a Swell Party This Is.
And have you heard the story of a boy, a girl, unrequited love?
Sounds like pure soap opera.
I may cry.
Tune in tomorrow. What a swell party this is. What frails, what frocks,
What broads?
what furs, what rocks.
They're beautiful.
Why, I've never seen such gaiety.
Neither did I.
It's all just too exquisite, really.
Bing and Frank just going for it, and it is just a wonderful piece of staged musicality.
One of the wonders and one of the great joys of Crosby's career and Sinatra's career is what they did in High Society and what it represented.
Have you heard about dear Blanche? Got run down by an avalanche.
No.
Don't worry, she's a game girl, you know. Got up and finished fourth.
This kid's got guts.
Having a nice time? Grab a line.
Instead of sort of running away from it, they had a duel, you know, virtually in the film, and it's one of the most wonderful songs put on film.
Swelligant, elegant party. This is.
Bing Crosby's interest in how music was recorded was sparked again in the late 1950s, when he and Frank Sinatra co-founded United Western Recording Studios, Hollywood's most state-of-the-art recording space.
Along with Sinatra, he invested in United Western, a recording studio in Los Angeles, and just had impeccable acoustics, and is still being used today. It really helped the singer's voice come to the front.
Then, of course, because it was state-of-the-art, because he had access to all the kinds of equipment that he'd in fact developed or had caused to be developed, all the recording stars of the day wanted to use it because he was so far ahead of anything else that was in existence. So it could be said that if it hadn't been for Crosby and his entrepreneurship, then Sinatra would not have had quite the same launch to his career, not quite the same facility to create such wonderful sounds to his songs.
Undoubtedly, you know, as much as Sinatra was kind of the next generation and was, you know, his rival, I think there was huge amounts of respect and friendship that formed between them. And Sinatra was following his trail. And all the work that Crosby had done with recording and developing how music would be sung and songs would be sung, not just on record, but also on film, was a gift to Sinatra to thrive on.
In 1957, Bing married his second wife, Catherine Grant Crosby. The couple would go on to have 3 children. In 1961, Crosby starred in his last Road to movie, The Road to Hong Kong.
When 2 guys pull together, it's teamwork. In foul or sunny weather, it's teamwork.
The last road movie was The Road to Hong Kong, with a completely new cast, although Dorothy Lamour was given a small cameo because Bob Hope thought she should be in it somewhere. Bing thought she was too old for the part anymore. But it was Peter Sellers and Joan Collins who were the stars of it.
Come on, Doc. We want to get this fella's memory back. Now, will you get on with the therapy?
No, my dear fellow, but I tell you what I will do. What? I'll get on with the therapy. First of all, we have the special all-India close-up eye test reading chart. Now, read, please, from the 4th line down. Thank you very much.
I owe you 1,300 rupees?
1,300. A minute ago, it was 1,200.
You should have jumped at it when you had a chance, my dear fellow.
Doctor, there's nothing wrong with my eyes.
The Road to Hong Kong is perhaps not the best swan song to this series. They were getting a little bit older. They got Joan Collins in, who was younger, didn't quite fit. They weren't sort of acknowledging that their careers had progressed, their ages had progressed. Maybe even Joan Collins and Peter Sellers stole a little of the spotlight from Bing and Bob.
Can't you see us in a rickshaw, dropping in on Susie Wong? Can't you see the split kimono on the road to Hong Kong?
Although The Road to Hong Kong was Bing's last on-screen performance in the series, Bing wanted to make The Road to the Fountain of Youth.
He did have one last unfulfilled ambition, which was to make one final Road to movie. The abusive title, which was Road to the Fountain of Youth, which may tell us more about Bing Crosby than anything else. He was, again, slightly ahead of the game, because what he wanted to do was to do it in the style of Monty Python. The fact that he even knew who Monty Python was in terms of their comedy show is very telling. The fact that he thought that he could actually pull it off is even more telling.
Sip a little oolong tea.
Bing was very much a man of the times. He was able to adapt, and to want to do something in the Monty Python style would have been absolutely fantastic to see those guys taking on comedy in a new way.
You can kind of imagine a kind of stranger, more self-aware film, more ironic film that might have come, you know. Might he eventually have laughed at Bingness, you know, he might have because he didn't, you know, he was shields were always down. It seemed to lack a bit of self-awareness, Bing Crosby, but maybe there was a film there that broke through the armor.
Bing would take a step back from Hollywood filmmaking in the 1960s and 70s, and instead focus on performing live and appearing on television.
Quite apart from the actual oral stuff in terms of the sound quality of the thing, he also managed to transfer that into developing videotape. So he was well ahead of the game there. And he created his own television series and used that to be able to, he could tape those and then syndicate those all over the world.
In 1964, Crosby starred in The Bing Crosby Show, a situational comedy starring Bing as a middle-aged family man.
Everything else had been live to air, and now you could pre-record. You could make a better program. You could hit different parts of the country, different time zones. It was a big achievement.
It's a little bit laughable now. You know, it was very popular at the time, but leaning over a piano and you know, the fight of the jumpers. You know, there's an element of silliness.
I suppose if we have to blame him for anything, it was for creating what we now know as the laugh track, which was if you have a comedy and you know you've got a gag that falls flat on the floor, if you have people laughing, people forget that it's not funny, and he basically engineered that as well. He was the architect behind using that.
Despite Crosby's lack of on-screen appearances in the 1970s, his popularity remained high, and audiences around the world flocked to see him perform.
Hello. You the new butler? Well, it's been a long time since I've been the new anything. What's happened to Hudson?
It was in London in September 1977 that he made his last Christmas special, which featured David Bowie.
And this one. This is my son's favorite. Do you know this one?
Oh, I do indeed. It's a lovely thing.
He made his last Christmas show, and included in that is a duet with David Bowie of Little Drummer Boy, which is a really lovely piece of work, a really extraordinary. It's a good one to go out on.
I think this is such a great tribute to Bing Crosby before he died. He's doing this amazing duet with David Bowie. Who else would take those risks? This is a guy that was a radio star in the 1930s, coming all the way to being the most modern you possibly could with David Bowie.
Our finest day of glory. Say the day live in peace,
showed great wisdom, you know, first Sinatra. He picked people that would be, you would think, contradictory forces toward what he represented, and kind of tried to marry himself to them in some way, enjoy the irony, enjoy the contradictions it presented. He remained Bing, and he remained cuddly and jumpered and kind of at ease, but alongside this, Bowie, during one of his more extreme phases, his kind of elfin, pale-skinned creature. It's quite an odd sight, but the song is rather enduring.
I pray my wish will come true.
The sad thing is, it wasn't actually transmitted until after his death. He obviously saw it, but he wasn't able to appreciate how it went down.
I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places.
He went from the recording of that last Christmas special to Spain to play golf. And Bob Hope always says that his doctor had told him, White, you can play, but you can only play 9 holes because of his failing health. And Bing Crosby, being Bing Crosby, played 18 holes. And at the 18th, he had a heart attack and collapsed and died.
The fuss when he died was astonishing, especially from older film goers who remembered him so well.
Whenever I feel afraid, I hold.
There hasn't been anybody quite like Bing Crosby because there hasn't been anybody who's crossed so many different aspects of recorded music and entertainment.
So he introduced into kind of cinema, as he had done into music, a kind of softer quality that people got very attached to.
The world loved him, really, because he came to prominence in the 30s and 40s when you really did need a little bit of comforting and a little bit of certainty.
There will never be another voice like Bing Crosby. I think in 500 years, people will still be listening to White Christmas. He's got the voice.